highest level planning tool that we use here at the town, and if that is the case, then maybe a product of that is that these annual budget processes get a little bit simpler because we've got a bunch of that stuff figured out in other areas. But it is a process we're required to follow as state law, so not necessarily to have a budget committee or to have, 3 budget committee meetings, but just to do an annual budget. So if we get together and figure it out. So we've got like what, Jen, 8, 10 slides.
Yeah.
To talk about our long-term outlook. Our approach to this year's budget. Wages, other expenses, revenues, the enterprise funds, the capital project fund. And we do have a real skeletal draft budget document that Jen has been working from that we're prepared to talk through a little bit at the end of the meeting, let's say. We've got, what do we have, 2 hours till the council meeting, and I think we're hoping to give ourselves a nice break in between of at least a half an hour, but preferably a little bit longer. Just to get ready for the big crowd that will surely arrive at the council meeting. So right.
Okay, do you want to click forward for me, Brooke? Until we get this going.
So obviously, yeah, we're doing longer term, we're trying to do longer term planning these days. We've got, what's that? Where'd they go? We've got direction from the council to lengthen planning horizons. Part of how we're doing that is by sending our capital planning outlook. We're doing water and sewer master planning, we're doing some facilities planning. We are using a formal market benchmarking tool to plan and determine wages annually. That helps us have a little bit more a deeper horizon when it comes to our payroll costs in future years. A big part of our outlook on wages these days also comes from the council, and that was some direction to stabilize and sustain the marshal's office. We've had some challenges with retention and with hiring in the marshal's department, especially for part-time folks who continue to be essential just based on kind of the scheduling and some of the specific needs of our police department. So we made progress in that, as we've discussed recently. We've joined public safety, so costs have gone up for we've joined URS public safety, so retirement benefit costs have gone up recently. We are in the process of hiring a fifth marshal's deputy, and we hope that person will be working and operational and equipped sometime here in the fourth quarter of the current fiscal year. So we haven't seen those costs, the full costs of that are not reflected in the FY25 budget. That's a significant driver of their revenue and expense, or the expense of revenue picture for next year.
I don't think I have control yet, do I? No.
Next page.
Okay.
So for fiscal year 26, we've always started the town of Alta budget process by talking about revenues. I seem to remember in the past that we would. I remember budget conversations in the past where we would talk about revenue increase before we would talk about expenses, which is certainly one way we could do it. But I think we try to talk about them in unison now. We know costs are going up, and we've really got no choice but to meet them to some extent if we want to, operate a sustainable organization. Staff our positions, take care of our assets, etc. So some of the big questions for this year: will we do a property tax increase? Will we do? We talk about doing truth in taxation. And I think what we typically mean when we do truth in tax, by doing truth in taxation, quote unquote, is to raise raise the property tax rate in order to generate the revenue. To sort of keep up with inflation, and then, we generally have to lose property tax revenue. Less we increase the rate. So just a housekeeping, we do a housekeeping level property tax increase, or we raise property tax increases more, so that's a choice. Another big part of the sale of the revenue picture is sales tax revenue. Jenny's assumed the same sales tax revenue projection in the budget document that we can review at the end of the meeting. The big question for the council this year is whether we will apply any or all local option treated room tax, which don't, many governments do. Of course, we know that raising room taxes are going to go up. The legislation passed, so we've got so transit room taxes will go up 1% this year. It was maybe gonna be as much as 1.5. I think that the final version ended up not giving Sullivan County or first class counties that additional 0.5%. Of course, we've discussed the option of using unreserved fund balance or spending down the general fund buffers, maybe the popular parlance. But that's something we can contemplate as we start to look at the balancing of revenues and expenses for the general fund. The shuttle is a big expense for us. So far in the budget, I think we have the same revenue and expenses for the shuttle, so that the cost of that is subject to increase. Our contract without the shuttles, shuttle allows them to propose cost increase.
But it is a multi-year contract.
It is, which is with an escalation. Clause. So not necessarily, it's not like an annual escalation clause, right? Only it just provides.
For them to adjust as they need.
And there are other levers we can pull with the shuttle program. Other variables like the need. What if bus service changes such that our town shuttle service is no longer necessary? For instance.
Are we gonna talk about these like as we go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ton of material in this, so I think.
No, that's right.
To like hold.
No, I think
Yeah.
we're gonna walk through this and basically that'll be the end of the meeting. We go through the general capital. projects.
Yeah,
One or two.
and we have more detail on some than others, so,
Do you feel they're gonna be lengthy
no,
today? Okay, cool. So transient room tax, I know we've talked about this before. I'm a fan of us doing it. And I think, the question even gets posed to us, how come you as a town with such limited options? Why do we not leverage that? And I know there's probably some sensitivity to walk through that, but I'd like to see us walking down that road because I think we should, because it's a legitimate and common source of resource for a town.
For a resort community.
For a resort community town, right, sorry. And what's the consensus amongst everybody? How do you feel about it?
Actually, let me just back out of that. I'm actually not sure. I think it may be that any municipality has the same local option. The resort community sales tax, which we do apply, is unique to resort communities. But the transient.
Regardless, it's available to us.
It is.
So who cares about Harriman or whatever, but I think if we've got the opportunity, and it does, everything I've heard makes it seem like an appropriate thing to do, not just reasonable to pursue it.
so just, for us thinking about this conversation and moving forward, so I prepared some numbers probably a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. I have not, revisit those numbers. I'd like to revisit those numbers and probably bring them to you for the next meeting.
Let's do that.
To like at least know what an estimate might be.
Can't remember the order of magnitude.
196. Yeah, I remember that number. It was 200 grand. It was like a $200,000 number.
Yeah, because I was doing that in the resort at the same time, so if you remember that one being specific to that, then that's great.
But I think that's what I would ask. And we don't even have to bog down on it here. Why don't you do that? And let's take a look at it next time. And then we can entertain it, because I think the numbers will help shape whether we
Yes.
really want to pursue it or not, and let's not bog down on it now.
Well, a couple of comments around
Oh,
that.
yeah, but
All right.
by all means.
So first, per presentation again, we need to raise more money. So anything that we do to raise more money
Yes.
makes sense, and that's an obvious thing to. I think the only thing, the way that Jen has it questioned here, do we wanna do it this year or next year? And I think what we should do is look at the timing based upon two other things that I think are important. One is, what are we gonna do about the water fund? All right, because I don't see, the only way to afford the build out that we need in the water fund, per John Byrne numbers, was a 10% increase in the water rate every year. That feels like that might be right for town rebellion, all right?
I think
For
so.
what?
A rebellion.
Rebellion.
Yes.
And
Insurgents,
so the
yeah.
only other way to do it is to basically make a one-time grant out of the general fund. So I think that's an issue that we should talk about. It doesn't have anything to do with the 26 budget.
I'll just offer a third way to do it is to assume that, I mean, the tool, the water fund tool that John created that does. Project those annual rate increases, assumes that we pay for those out of cash. And, yeah, I know that that's like the out the way, and it's great not to have to take on debt. To pay for projects, but we can also get a loan of some kind from the state or a bond and pay those costs over a longer period of time.
I think there's a very,
Which could reduce the need to raise rates as steeply, whereas.
yeah, you're right, we could do it over like 20 years. And you could do the same thing from the general fund. Probably the way that you do that is lend from the general fund and then pay it back over 20 years, backed up by a bond. But anyway, I don't wanna bog down on these things, I just wanna quickly mention them. It's, I think the water fund is important, and there was a second thing which I'm forgetting. Maybe I've got a note on it. And I don't.
Well, the time of the year makes a difference too, when we.
Oh, I know what the other thing was. I suggested that we might want to drain the money out of the general fund first. Because what that does is it makes it a
Shows
lot
need.
more understandable.
Yeah, shows need.
Right? And so I think we,
That's
again,
this,
not
the
in this,
unreserved fund balance.
yeah, I don't think it really should be a topic for this meeting. But I think we need to have some fulsome discussions about both of those things.
Yeah, that's.
It just sets us, yeah, I agree, I mean, there was strong input from the council about that in the retreat. It does pose the question of if we don't raise revenue now, when do we do it?
Yeah.
Cause it's really a kind of a one shot deal.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And the later you do it, the less you accumulate, the more you're gonna have to loan or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
as a general rule, when we realize, we know there's so many things coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
There's variables involved, but here's what's an absolute agreed upon fact. We're gonna need a lot more money than we currently have. We're figuring out these ways to do it. So anything that progresses our budget and the ability to appropriately tax or levy these types of revenue, that's maybe not the right word, but I think we should do sooner rather than later.
yeah,
The town, I truly feel is in a state of, we're gonna make some pretty big leap forwards in the next decade. In a way that we've never done before.
I think the next 5
Fine.
years will actually do the plan for those investments and. The more that we can get done this summer on the long-term planning stuff, the easier it's gonna be for subsequent.
So back to you, I mean. Do we look at doing that now and let's, how do we bleed down that?
I start drain the.
Well, so, I mean,
little
when
fund
you
out.
say drain, when I think of drain, I think like you're bringing it to zero, and I will say that scares the Jesus out of me.
No.
The jury will disregard the word drain, what I'd say, like, utilize.
Yes,
Yeah.
and I think we just need to like recognize like what are we, there's a happy medium in there.
And practically, like the way it looks in the budget document is that we just. there's an unused unreserved fund balance line item in the
Correct.
budget and it shows a positive amount.
Well, it's usually zero. I've never seen it be used, to be honest.
I've seen it, I think I've seen it just to balance the budget at the end of the year.
Oh, okay, yeah,
But
It's a
like,
different
by a
tool
couple
than-
of $1,000s,
yeah, and I,
Right, budget dust.
right,
not a standard deviation.
Yeah.
Whatever the risk.
right, so I mean, we wanna think about our.
Is there a percentage that
Budget,
you have? in
well,
mind?
right, our budget's roughly 3 million. So I mean, that's a good number to go off of in
General fund.
general fund.
Is there some prohibition or limit on how much we can move from the capital fund to the general?
From the capital to the general, well, you have to budget for it and you have to
From
make
the
sure.
capital to the general?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we don't typically do that.
Usually
I
So
know
it's
you
out
do it.
of-
I'm just wondering,
Yeah,
to what extent is the capital fund?
Let me answer that question. There is not a number. Okay, so, this is going from memory from the last time I talked to Polly about this, okay? So, I don't think we've ever done it, but it can be done. And so, and I wanna go back to the drain number. I did propose a methodology to actually calculate how much extra we should keep in the fund. Even that, I thought was frankly overly conservative. But we need to have that discussion,
Mhm.
but. To give you comfort, you can move money from the cap, all we do is we move it from the general fund into the capital fund. And then the question is, all right, if we make a mistake, we move it back, the answer is yes, you just can't do it frequently.
Yeah, got it.
And the best thing would be is. There's either some emergency or we calculated it incorrectly, we need to do it. But you wouldn't wanna do it for small amounts, you wanna say,
No.
okay, we made a mistake and.
I'm just thinking that our backstop against insolvency.
Yeah.
Might be a fairly,
Absolutely,
A simple transaction to
Yeah.
move money.
yeah,
So it sounds like we can.
and remember, John Byrne has traditionally argued against that. And the reason he did it is because, he was correct, but I think that time has passed. The correct part is, if it's in the general fund, you can deploy it any place.
Right.
If you move it into the capital fund. The only way to deploy it any place is to move it back into the general fund and then back out, and it's awkward and looks like bad planning.
yeah,
And so he basically said, we got a free option as long as we leave it there. But now I think to get the general public on board with the fact that we're gonna do truth in taxation and we're gonna, do some things to increase some rates here, I think that this is the time to actually move it.
so
what
it could be
percentage
bad
would you
planning,
say?
it also could be bad luck.
Yes,
And,
absolutely. Fire or something or bad
yeah,
weather.
COVID, things
Is it
shut down.
utilize it to 40% remaining kind of a
Oh,
thing?
I would go higher since we. it's
60%?
something that- Yeah, I was,
So burn
that's
out
my-
third 40% of the budget perhaps, of that 40% of that cash,
Fund balance.
fund balance.
Yeah, I was,
I think I might be comfortable with that.
30,
I was thinking.
Down to 30
no,
or,
you-
oh,
down
okay,
to 70.
70,
okay,
but right, I mean, this is just what I recall from the retreats, feeling like. The consensus was around a level of comfort, I think it was driven by your bell curve
Yeah.
and.
Well, let's not
One
overthink
step,
it, just
two or
call it,
three.
call it 70%.
do you remember
Utilize
what
30.
that percentage?
I'd rather
Wait
spend,
till next
bring the
meeting.
numbers in on the standard deviation, I'll update those things
Okay.
and come back, because that's really what it's about. It's about what the risk, and
Right.
I'll point out something Jen did here. If you can go back one slide, I actually agree with it. But, so the,
Actually?
As a general rule, you don't agree with what she puts up there?
But actually.
Or are you just prepping for the meeting that's coming after this?
no, let me rephrase that. Jen changed our standard methodology, but she didn't call it out as a change in standard methodology. Yet, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do.
Okay.
So our standard methodology for projecting revenues for next year has been a rolling 3-year average. If you remember, the plot has been going like this.
Mhm.
And if you do a rolling 3-year average, it's going to be much higher than if you project for next year. So the question is, why would you change the standard methodology? And the answer is because, you know what, climate change and crap like that is getting real. we're hearing back from Mike Mon, blah, blah, blah. So, the actual was just because when you make a change in the standard methodology, I like to really call it out and say.
No, that's exactly, I mean, I did that.
Yeah, I know.
yes, And
And you did it right,
I
I
did,
think you did it right.
I've been I didn't bring them as part of this, but I've been studying like where we're at this year compared to previous
Yeah,
years. And it really does match with what Mike's been reporting in the council
Yeah, yeah.
meetings, and so, I mean, I think we're gonna meet our budgeted amount this year.
Yeah,
But I
don't
think we
want to
have to be
project it for next year. I
careful,
agree.
yeah.
To me, that was a one-time thing driven in a large part by COVID and by some very big demographic changes that we had, but.
I think it's
that's-
stabilizing out. a little.
Exactly.
Thanks, Fred.
Yeah, I'll take this one, you take the next one.
Okay, sure.
Relaxing. So obviously wages, it's been the big, the primary topic of conversation in our last two budget years. We've really wholly updated the way we think about wages, modernized it. And it's based around the use of a benchmarking tool, the worth of work framework study that we work with Technology Net.
Mike Swallow.
Mike Swallow. To use, it's seemingly the most widely used public sector compensation benchmarking service available in the state of Utah. I mean, I think we could really use almost any public entity or special district in the state to use as our comparable data sets through this tool. So Jen, it takes a lot of work on Jen's part to update the tool. How many individual jobs are we pulling into that? Like how many
Oh,
rows are there? And
it's
that's
just kind of a, honestly, for how savvy the tool is, it's updating the tool is not as straightforward as it
Yes.
was.
But it's like
But
70 or 80 jobs, right?
Yeah,
It's-
we have a subscription to technology.net and create these batches of jobs and things, but bringing them in it's kind of wonky in Excel. It's unlike any other functionality that I typically use, but anyways, we have brought in that data and updated it based on like current pay rates and a handful of things. So like the framework in and of itself, which is, gives you a base wage, I want to say, because I think there's been a lot of confusion with the council from when we developed the study in the base wage and then budgets. There's been a big, like, people got really confused about like what those two things represent.
Yeah.
And so I just want to be a lot more apparent about like talking about base wages versus budgeting, which includes things like overtime and like a little bit of cushion and stuff like that. So,
Well, there was a difference too between baseline and what we were targeting, which we thought was the appropriate thing. Baseline and appropriate were not the same number. So I think that's where some of the confusion came too.
yeah, so I just want to be a little bit careful.
I'm not confused,
Yeah,
and personally, I don't think so. I think we wandered around the desert for a while.
Oh, I'm sure. So some things to think about with wages this year. We are gonna be compensating a fifth full-time police officer for an entire year, so that represents a significant chunk, or the most significant single chunk of the payroll cost increases that we'll project in future slides.
In round numbers, what is
just hold on. It's coming.
Sorry.
Okay.
So
It's
we've used what Social Security Administration cost of living adjustment figures to do our COLA projections in the past. I'm not sure if that's right or wrong, but it's what we used. And according to the Social Security Administration, that was 2.5% this year. So that's what we're building in for the time being. Performance or merit updates. My goal is to budget to offer COLA and space for performance and merit updates where they're warranted. But that we're basically what we're doing now now is performance reviews, and supervisors will communicate with us about what they're looking for their employees, and then we just sort of crunch that into the final budget and see what where the draft budgets as they develop and see what we have space for, basically. We are talking in the office about increasing the I'll call them stipend amounts for town council members, treasurer, I don't know, planning commission members. Those numbers have not changed for over a decade.
Yes.
And
There's $75 a meeting.
For
for
planning
planning,
commission
for planning,
members.
yeah, and we all know how much time
Yeah.
it takes just to participate in a single meeting as a town council member or a planning commission member, so I think it's worth it for us to consider those numbers, and of course, we're coming to the election year, the council members, those anybody. Anyways, vendor contracts, I think we mentioned, the shuttle, the rate we pay for the shuttle could go up. It's safe to assume that, many of our contracts will increase by, 3 to 5%. Some of them are on 3-year cycles where they go by larger amounts, some of them just go up, some of them don't go up until they ask us to pay more. And right now in Jen's budget that we'll look at, we're assuming a $150,000 transfer to capital projects fund, is sort of a socking away of Acorn's capital expenses, and that's 5% or so of our $3 million.
I'd love it to be 10 or 20, but I think everything else, considering I felt like 5 was maybe a good starting point for this discussion.
Yeah, and particularly this year. I think that's a good call.
I review.
So this is the wage study. This is like high level results of the work with Mike Swallow that Chris just articulated. You've seen, I think, similar. Who doesn't see that? So that's right, Brett. Yeah, can you still see it? Okay. I could. So these are some numbers, and you're gonna kind of maybe need to, I mean, this isn't a compensation review committee, but you do review the budget, and we felt like at least sharing this with you was a good start, and kind of gives you a sense on the next slides of the proposals by department that we have. So I mean, we can see, I think the big messages here are like on the lower end of staff, like, we've got a lot of people at the midpoint. And then you can see where on the upper levels, kind of where we are.
Do we, are these wage numbers that are over there? Do they include benefits?
No,
They don't. So they're not through the cost of the.
they're not, but no, this is strictly wages. This is an hourly.
Okay.
Or can come down to an hourly or salary
Uh-huh.
position. So I've taken those numbers, and this is where I have a comparison between FY 25 and my very first draft of FY 26 by department. The things I want to point out are that these include overtime at consistent percentages that I've used in the past, which have always done us well.
Okay.
And then also, as Chris pointed out earlier, but we do have, we do have a 5th officer that'll be, we anticipate on duty full time. So total difference is just shy of $200,000. Where things stand right now.
And that is, I would just reiterate, that's for budgeting purposes, so
Yes.
that is to create space. That's to create space,
That's-
for us to make adjustments, on a merit basis as necessary.
So, I got a question on the 5th Marshal Police Department.
Yeah.
So the outside of the wage
Oh.
thing, when you go, no, back to the slide we were just on. When you go back to the police department and the increase, let's do 166.
Yeah.
That's his or her entire benefits and salary package. That's part of what drives that to 166.
That is part of what drives it.
Yeah,
yes.
part.
That's not
It's
just
part.
that one person.
No, right, but
Yeah,
it's the biggest
Yes.
chunk of it, because what we're showing up here above is that midpoint 71. And, it's probably like $100,000. for that.
Well,
that
and something I do wanna point out, and Mike, pay close attention to this, is that, the
Right.
way the wage study works is it's based, it works best based on 20/80 hours, which is a normal 40-hour work week. That's not how our that's not the declared hours for the deputies,
Right.
they work a 48-hour
48,
work week.
right.
So what I've done is, these numbers up here are based on 20, a full work schedule at 20/80 hours a year. I've calculated out for our officers what the range would be for them for the 48-hour work.
Ah, gotcha.
So it's just
Yeah,
down
yeah, sorry.
below
I
because
should've-
I didn't wanna mess up the,
No,
no, but I'm
that's
glad
right.
you asked that because I forgot to point it
Yeah,
out.
no,
It's
that's,
really, really important
Yep, that's a good thing, that's a good
to
thing to
see
know.
that range in what's, I mean, that's ultimately really what we're talking about for them. And there's job descriptions.
Yes.
Yeah, so when I look at that, it probably pushes that. It's probably like 110 out of that 166 kind of a thing.
Yeah,
Roughly, I'm not looking for, this is not troubleshooting or stumping people, I just want a general sense.
And the rest of it is just, I think, largely comes down to the fact that it's a big department, it's.
Yeah, no,
These
are not challenge questions. I'm just trying
And
to get a
they
feel.
also have they have the biggest buffer in
Right.
the overtime compared to the other departments, just because of the nature of the work that they do and, you
Oh,
know,
yeah, you have me at hello.
so.
What I'm still trying to figure out is, what's the cost for that fifth officer in that very draft FY 26 out of the 166? What is the dollar amount for that?
That
deputy?
one individual.
Do we have?
I mean, yes, I have it, but not off the top.
It's about 100K.
I would think it had to be over, I'd have to think it's like.
Well, it's, I mean, are you talking, yeah, because if you look at these numbers,
Yeah, I'm looking at this 166 to 922.
right,
That's the number.
so, I mean, so if we're paying the median wage, that number, I mean,
But
that's
that's just the
92,000,
way, that's not social
exactly.
security and employment and all the other stuff that goes with
Exactly.
it. Okay, I will no longer pursue my line of questioning on that.
Well,
Just generally
No,
curious.
actually, I think you're raising a good point, and it's a difference between what do we need to use the study versus what does it actually cost
Translate into
us?
the budget.
What does it actually cost?
These are
us
not-
that people
These are
know?
not apples to
Right.
apples.
So she's adjusted it to make it comparable to the study,
Yeah,
and that's the right thing to do for using the external benchmarking stuff.
yeah,
But at the same time, it doesn't give us a really accurate picture of what are our total personnel costs and.
Well, yeah, but we did that in a previous budget committee meeting.
Yeah.
Where I presented on the total cost of like what it's gonna cost, and so I decided for this meeting.
Not
That
to
we
do
weren't
that.
gonna rehash that sort of stuff, but we can go back and look at those numbers.
Well, I think when you get to the point of
And then-
presenting it to the town council, I'd have both sets of numbers. And, you know, the other thing I just want, these are just process points. The other thing that I wanted to raise is, you know, some of the people question what we should use for comparables. And I'm starting to think the only comparables we should use are our recruiting area. I mean, de facto, we are recruiting from Sandy and Granite and Salt Lake City, and that's about it. I don't really understand why Bryan Head or any of the other resort towns where people may live much closer or whatever. I mean, we're competing against Salt Lake City, and to me, that's the relevant
I
comparables.
think it balances a little bit and maybe, I'm assuming that those smaller communities have smaller budgets and it brings it down a little bit because we are smaller.
Yeah,
So, I mean, that's-
the outcomes are like to pay comparable rates for our job titles and job values to what they pay at Sandy, Cottonwood Heights, Salt Lake City, especially Park City. I mean, these increases would be going up way more. I mean, what I wish I'd been more quick to say in that last meeting where we were talking about this, what was that we're not just rolling over pay rates from Sandy City. By any means, the tool that we use in the comparables we choose doesn't allow us to do that. But I see what you're saying, though, you wanna be able to beat, that's your priority.
Well, I wanna make sure we don't have excess staff turnover. That's
Yeah.
my main concern.
No, it's,
And I think in my general experience, people horrifically underestimate the cost of turnover. Continuity matters incredible. amount. And so that's why I was saying that, you know, we have to look at where we're recruiting from.
Well, we just need good leadership in the marshal's office, we'll just have.
We got good
Find good
leadership. Office.
The number I got when we did this before was 136.5 for that,
Oh, are you looking in your, okay.
yeah, Matt, so, okay, that answers my question too.
Out of the
It's basically
196.
at 166,
Yeah.
Right,
basically,
and those are based,
it's gonna
those
adjust a
would
little
be-
bit, but so I'll call it 130 out of 166.
And Jim, that's actually the way I present it. I would say the total is 195, of which. Well, no, actually, you can't do it that way. I would present the total that's due to staff increase. You know, increase in staff is this much of 195. And the rest of it is, you know, the COLA increase for the other people. But then I would also have,
That's also a simple way to convey the information.
yeah.
okay, I can do that.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a pretty good idea too.
Capital projects,
No, hang on, I got one other comment on
Go for it.
I have two other comments on compensation. One is, you said we don't have a compensation committee. Maybe we should have one, or maybe it should be formally delegated to the budget committee. Here's why. Now that we've gone to the town manager model, you're inherently conflicted in making a recommendation. And so you really wanna have outside scrutiny on that, and a formal way to do it would be to have a compensation.
That's really
committee.
good catch.
Or delegate budget committee, I
Are
don't
you
care.
acknowledging that Chris is
Which?
part of the budget committee?
Yeah. Yeah, well, he's also in his town manager role. I mean, what he said is, look, I'm not giving everybody the increases we would if we want to. That's a great recommendation. I trust Chris, but it's bad process, right? It's because he is inherently conflicted. So better to have him have that discussion in a smaller group that can go into real detail.
And then it can support him in the face
Exactly,
of the
exactly.
opposition.
Because
So he's
otherwise
not
it comes up as
compromised,
the town
he's not
council.
compromised and standing up and
you
saying,
know.
this is what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Exactly, why did you put this town in there and all that kind of stuff? So that was one of my comments. And the second one I forgot. So it'll come back. Oh, I know. Second one was. If we're gonna look at compensation, and you've heard me say this before, but now I'll do it more formally. We have what I consider an artifact of Mayor Levitt. Well,
I know,
that's where it came from.
I know.
That's where it came from.
Yes,
And we have this bonus stuff that we do every year to people. And it is non-comparable to any other town. It originated because we didn't have enough money and Mayor Levitt would dip into his.
At the end of the year, go here, thanks
Exactly.
for a great job. I
Right.
understand where it came from, and I
And-
understand why we don't want that.
And it's non-comparable to anything
No,
else.
I-
While we're doing this, I think we should get rid of that, you know.
I also support, I think that is an important thing to do to standardize
Right.
and be above suspicion. I think that's a smart thing. The gentleman in the body armor has a comment.
The bonus thing, Mike Mori,
Yeah, real body armor.
yeah, the bonus thing, it's always been weird, it's always been a weird planning thing. It's also to some degree, something that our employees become accustomed to. I'm gonna throw this comment out and walk away. I have observed monies like that being used in a way that's called retention incentives. Successfully. Which is not uncommon in Salt Lake County.
In and out of public safety both, okay? Well, that's something to consider.
Well, it gives you a baseline to validate you know, why spend the money?
I just think it'll be painful to transition away from it because people are accustomed to it.
Right.
But
Well,
and this is just my MO, I'm never afraid of Band-Aids.
if we're managing and supervising well, that people should be held to standards. And to be eligible for those kind of incentives, you need to meet those standards. So, things like that can be a valuable tool to help us manage well.
Which,
But I
turns
think-
it into more of a performance bonus than it's historically done.
But
Yeah.
I also think it's oh, I was gonna go somewhere else with this. You should say something.
I do wanna point out, this is not a lot of money. I think certain council members have made comments to me that make me think like, wait, what do you think about these bonuses? I mean, these are often like $700 bonuses.
Yeah.
To full-time employees. These are not huge amounts of money. So is the amount of money versus the like emotional and like the performance review, like, is it worth it?
It's
Well-
not standard.
But one thing I would offer,
That's true.
and then, and whether it is or not, I'm not.
Municipal administration, maybe common in law enforcement organizations.
I'm not gonna weigh on that, but I think if you are looking to transition away from that, your time is now, because we have spent so much effort in communication and study and change in wages to improve them for our deserving people, that if there was ever a time to eliminate this thing for cause, if we thought it was worth, we need to do it now. Because we just reset everybody and we say this is part of that reset
You
now.
can make the decision now and delay it a year or two so that people got used to it. That's a
That's not my approach, but if it's not a lot of money,
Okay.
I'm also not I'm not afraid to spend money, as you know. I think if we have money to do things that are right, that's our job, is to appropriately execute funds. And if this thing's been a great retention tool, and that's kind of what I heard from one of our key leaders who has to manage the most challenging workforce in the town, then maybe we just leave it there and you should never bring this up again.
My take on this is, when I first discovered we were ending on bonuses, I thought, this is nuts. This is the public sector. Bonuses are normally key to some sort of performance that's measurable. We don't have that.
That is also incentivized to be measurable.
Yeah.
That's why it's a bonus.
And
Bonus by definition is beyond what you.
Or it's, right, it's based on performance and it's calculated not only by performance, but by the company's performance, so.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
have to target.
Yeah, you
and
target.
how much money you make.
Yeah, the company has to be able to pay it out as well.
Yeah,
And typically in the capitalist, exploitive of the proletariat system. I live on a disability.
Is the standard COLA newer with this, or is that the COLA increase?
What?
Like, has the town always had a standard COLA increase?
no.
No,
So when I look at it, it's we get rid of the bonus, but we know that we get these cost increases.
That's Leanne's point.
Okay.
We dramatically.
Yeah, so it needs to be a good, I see his point, and I'd be taking.
But I also think, what you're saying too, I think that adds credence to removing them, because over the
Yeah.
long haul, as we start to do some big things here that we're gonna spend money on, because they're required, anywhere that we don't leave ourselves vulnerable to, well, you were wildly doing this or that. This is one of those things that's easily perceived by the public, who we are looking at, and our other contributors, businesses, as well, you just are, you can do this, and it won't matter how much or how little the money is to those people, there'll be a point of contention they'll bog us down on. So I forgot about that too, that's really important, Molly, because we're doing COLAs, which we should always do, and we will from here on out. So maybe this is the time to get rid of it. I think the only counter to that would come from that office. Is it worth doing that, or is this appropriate to talk about it right now?
I think we should.
Mike, if yours was the only place that this thing remained, because of the volatility of schedule and the risks involved to people and the ability to save a life. Do we leave this thing here and do you need to have it? Cause if you don't need to have it, I'd argue we should maybe get rid of it now. I'll let Mike.
I think we could get rid of it now. I think that, an explanation from the town's leadership on why it's being eliminated is prudent, give the employees a chance to, react to the change. Because, I can tell you that, especially for some of our newer employees, that are maybe 5 years into this. They're not dumb, they know that one of these disbursements comes around Christmas time and they do their shopping accordingly.
Yeah.
Well, so I think to that point, and I was waiting for you to say that. I think the great thing about this, and I don't know where it came from in the room, was we eliminated in the FY 27 budget.
Or you can,
Because it's like, this is coming, but here's Christmas this year, but we're doing this for these reasons, because it's better for the town and we feel it's appropriate. Know that in 27 and that won't be there,
or you can absorb it into wages with an explanation that.
Yeah.
which I'm happy to do too, because it feels to the employee they're not losing anything.
Instead of doing this thing that's already defend, we're gonna take this amount, include it in your wage. Plan appropriately for, your holiday shopping.
Yeah, and I think between the two leaders that normally would have to address that, this one over here and this one over here, that's manageable.
Yeah, and I think the key is you give people enough notice to react, but.
Right, and that's my proposal, my pitch to this group is that we look, I suggest we do get rid of them. And I think that we we leave it as it is for the remainder of in the 26 budget, because that covers us through Christmas of 25. And we absorb it into their pay from there on out in 27. Does that make sense?
Well, no, there's, if we don't budget for it next year, there's no Christmas bonus.
Right, it's gonna go away. It won't be a Christmas bonus.
No,
But we're gonna leave it, we're gonna leave it in the budget cycle to manage this Christmas.
You're saying,
He said
Budget for
included in 26, but
Yeah.
not 27.
okay, calendar year.
yeah,
Yeah, but it's budget starting in June,
Yeah.
July.
Yeah.
So in July, for Christmas of 25, which is the FY 26 budget, they get the bonus. And then for 27, we roll that stuff in there and we message it to the employees and we take it out of the lexicon in 27.
well, they would message it to employees, you also message it to the town council. And to do that, what I would suggest is that we go back to. We've had some pretty big increases since we started the Mike Swallow stuff. Because it was pretty obvious that we were way behind.
Right.
And so I think we just looked at the increases every year since we started the Mike Swallow stuff and say, here's what we've been doing, this is why we're doing it. We got the COLA and we adjusted them every year for the change in the staffs, the number of staff. So we can just show how much the average compensation is going up. I think that's the justification that the town council and frankly the employees need as well.
Yeah,
You
especially
know-
about the employees. I don't think we're gonna have. a
It'll
problem
be
with the council.
interesting to compare this chart 2 years ago with what it is now.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
I don't even think you have to dig down into it that deep. I think we're talking about, this is the continuation of a process that has benefited every employee. And we're just continuing that trend and closing out the process. That's all we're doing here. I don't think you have to dig that up. I don't think I refute your statement that has.
Well,
Because it's just something more for Jen to pull out and people go, oh yeah, whatever, and they move
I wouldn't
on.
be surprised if Jen mentioned it, that, we've got, 40% of the workforce in the room right now, and, we have gone through this payroll-wide adjustment process to evaluate the market and decide however formally we should or should not have done that we're gonna try to compete with the market to retain and recruit employees. But not everybody has received this, the amount of differential between what folks are getting paid several years ago and today is not consistent. the change has not been consistent across job titles. It's not like everybody got the same percentage.
No, of course
So
not.
when we
That's right.
talk about getting rid of the bonuses, or
Well,
let's compare previous wages to today, it's like, not everybody is in the same boat.
no, I agree, and that's why I think you should strike getting rid of bonus from any
Yes.
sentence ever. We're incorporating the bonuses into a formalized part of your compensation.
Yes.
Because we'll never have to face any flack from any outside party. All we're doing is incorporating your bonus into your pay in 27.
So you're saying take that amount and just have it in that?
Yeah, whatever you've been,
Bottom
give
line.
us a 5-year average of what you're doing for bonuses by position.
So you're not saying we can't issue them?
I think you incorporate it into their pay.
Well, then it's not a bonus.
That's right, it's not, but you, the part of the message is, we're upping salaries, we want you to keep getting this, but we feel that it's not in keeping with the spirit of a small town and the frugality with which we have to function. So let us give it to you in a way that no one can ever challenge us, and it's just part of your, and by the way.
And it's not a bonus anyway.
It's not a bonus, but here's the thing, it also, the COLA will go along with that too, because it's part of what will be kept in COLA. So it's actually, we're not taking it from you, we're morphing it. Does that
The
make
reason
sense?
it's not a bonus, Jim, is because it's not based upon performance, nor is it based upon profit
I
sharing.
disagree with, well, the profit sharing, yes, but there are reviews and it is based on performance.
Okay, fair enough.
Meaning,
Do you think we
the
need to keep it?
percentage changes dramatically.
No, we
based
mean that
upon
there are
performance?
reviews and that there are reports that go to
Pass
Chris and that we like.
Has pass failed?
Yeah.
How
Have we
many
ever
people
not
have
given
you-
them failed?
have you not, yeah, failed,
Not very many.
you're right.
So
I don't
It's
know,
not-
I mean, I've only been in it for a couple years.
let me ask a question to you 4 people here. Cause I think I understand his, but it's a different position. Should we keep the bonus?
No.
No, not you, you don't count. It's these 4 people.
Well, all I
Like,
will
just
say
say
is,
that.
say, okay, since I've been at the town, I've found the bonus program odd, and this was when I started. And they said, oh, you get a bonus, I said, really, the government, I get a bonus, and. You know, a part of the problem is that we just never formalized it, we never had a program on the books, it was apparently something that literally came out of Bill Levitt's pocket.
But here's what I
And
also.
if it had ever been formalized, maybe we would be further along in justifying it, but I do find it, and now we are trying to improve all of our human resources procedures. We do performance reviews that inform conversations about wages and compensation.
Bringing it up to standard.
We'll bring it up to standard.
Yes.
And
And working hard to do that.
I will say, I mean, Jen and Mike have been advocates for the bonus program, and I find their arguments. Come here,
I was, yeah, I mean, I will add, when I first came to the
I will
town,
say that.
I thought it was wacky.
Okay.
And I've totally come full circle on
Huh?
it, because,
Well, you've got 180 then.
yeah, thank you. I took a 180 on it, because I did see the benefit on return to me was worth it, meaning like. The history of the town, the amount of money that we're talking about, and like how I did see employees valuing it. All for those reasons, I've come around to be much more supportive of it than I once was. I was a super critic for a couple of years.
Yeah, but
I thought it was ridiculous.
But now we're talking about the leadership position you're in now and the change with the town is, you would say we should keep this.
I'm really struggling with it.
Okay,
I think that there's really good arguments for like, you know, if we are. You know, if our benchmark is always to at least do a COLA and to start considering merit increases and those things. Then yes, I think we could get away with.
yeah, because
But I
the
think we
merit
need
is
to-
the thing that allows
we
you
need to do those things.
right, but those things are also more profoundly significant monetary wise. The change compensation will be much more than some bonus at the end of the year. So again, I would come back and say, you better off to get rid of it. And the other thing I would add to you two and to all of you is, it also removes one more task to a task saturated staff.
No,
That is not a happy task to have,
Oh,
And
it's
if
a
you-
great task.
is it?
Like handing out candy.
100% it
Yes.
is.
It is until the person you don't give it to.
From my perspective, if we were gonna have a bonus program, it really should be linked to performance. And if you had a formal performance ranking of everybody, and you use different percentages of their salary based upon the performance ranking, that would be, in my mind, a real bonus.
So like
That's
creating
a lot
other
of
tasks
work.
for my staff, and
That's
I
a
don't want
lot.
more, I don't want more
Yeah.
tasks for my staff. Should we keep it, Mike?
So. Couple of things, like you, I'm not against spending money. I'm pretty good at answering questions that nobody asked me. So I'll probably do that. And, you know, it's always been a goal for my supervisor to stop inviting me to these meetings, so there we go. I'm against reducing compensation, any net reduction of compensation, even if it's $700 a year, I think it's a bad message to send our employees that put their guts into their work. I've worked for companies before where poor communication has led to some really unintended consequences, like, we're giving you a 1% merit increase this year. And people go, oh, that's my value?
Right.
Shit, here's my 1% back for you. And I've seen that result in theft, use of sick leave, lower productivity, apathy, more HR problems than the previous year. Whereas if you come to them as a smart employer and say, you know, times are a little tough, guys. We wish we could give you more. This is how much we have available. We want to thank you. You're gonna have employee more. So for that reason, I am against reducing people's income by any of them.
So I don't think.
But that's not what we're talking
No
about.
one's talking about reducing it, we're talking about messaging it as part of a standardized that also includes a COLA increase every year.
Sure, so if you're gonna take that 700, 1,400, whatever.
Yeah, it's
that
less than
number is,
1%.
and do something different with, I guess my plea is to be articulate and wise in how you explain it to our workforce. Segueing on Craig's comment about our recruiting area. And Chris, you're right, public safety does need more incentives for recruiting and retention, and maybe you know, other areas of government. You know, our really, I consider the town office all senior staff. We have in recent memory recruited for every position in that building. And it's been a challenge to do it. And we, I think, need to give ourselves flexibility to recruit professionals. By bringing people in laterally. You know, our goals shouldn't always be bring somebody in the cheapest way possible. If we've got a viable candidate that's got 10 comparable years with a comparable employer, why aren't we bringing in one?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking.
That's. And thankfully, this group has been way more receptive to that way of thinking than, you know, our management in the past. But I mean, in law enforcement, you know, you can drive by billboards that say, hey, sign, you know, $50,000 sign on bonus, it's going to be part of the police department. And, you know, everybody is doing lateral transfers. So if West Valley advertises for, hey, you know, we're gonna bring in lateral officers from any other agency, we're gonna pay $5,000 more a year, I can tell you predictably what's gonna happen. It's gonna get a lot of cops and everybody else is gonna have to bump up 10% to compete. So those are our realities.
But is this really the best, because what we're talking about here is just this thing, which is a small but possibly persuasive tool. Is that the best tool? Do we need to keep it because it's the best tool and we shouldn't roll this into something else? We're saying we're giving you this money in a standardized form that includes an increase every year for you to have.
I'm agnostic as long as the money is kept.
Well, yeah, well, we're definitely talking about keeping the money.
Yeah.
No one's talking about not giving it out. I think it's a positive message to give to the rest of the staff.
My ask is whatever we do it in a way that makes sense to our employees. Hey, we want to protect this money that's been historically hard to protect for you. And to do that, we're gonna roll it into your earnings.
And we're gonna make it part of something that includes an increase every year. So my takeaway from
I
what
think it's hard to say
Yeah,
that we
can't
can guarantee that.
Guarantee those, bonuses or COLAs, frankly, I mean, that's our objective.
No, we're gonna.
Okay,
Yeah.
right, the jury will disregard an unqualified staff member. So, because, you know, I think you need to message it. I'm not here to polish the message. What I'm trying to do is keep the compensation going to the people that I value in a way that I don't have to defend to the public, that pisses them off at a time when I need that public to support 7-figure numbers. And so, to me, I think this is a way to do that, and it also removes the task. But if you guys said it's the best thing, you're really the only person who I've heard of the 3 big leaders we've got that said, I would keep the bonus thing the way it is.
I said I was conflicted. I think that if we roll that in, we communicate with our employees. I mean, I think there is a way to execute it in FY 26.
Right,
I'm like, why would we, honestly, we have time, why would we wait?
I was just
think
trying
that
to be
only makes it
sensitive to
more
people who
in
might,
jeopardy.
around this Christmas, feel like suddenly the rug came out.
Yeah.
I'll
That's
put
9
that
months
down
away.
that message.
I think we have plenty of
So
time.
then
to
my pitch to this group is, I think we go down that road and we message it the right way, using none of the words that I said. And make sure they know that that's what, because that's what we're doing. Everything I'm talking about is, I want the money to go to my people, and I want it to be. It's no longer an issue, no one's gonna ever fight us on it and bring it up.
While we can't guarantee an increase every year, what we can say is that we have a formal review process every year. And I think it was that process that was missing that led us to get,
Yeah,
they have such a big gap to the market. So I'm sort of with you, this is part of the process. This is now the 3rd year in a row that we've done this, we're gonna
and
continue.
it's the conclusion of a process that we started.
Yeah.
And it's in the interest of our people, or I wouldn't push it, I'm not,
I'm gonna contradict my own damn self.
yeah,
Recognition and thank you is important.
yes.
Okay, and this has been a good tool for that, the bonus program. Over the years.
So you wanna keep it?
There's 2 ways, you know, that the town currently says, you know, financially, thank you to our employees. One is if we don't cut our fingers off in the previous month, we get a $10 gift card. 2 is there's this bonus program that comes around biannually where the town says, hey, we're sure glad you're still with us, thank you. And that means a lot to the troops. So there's values on both sides of the fence.
There is, but I'm not letting you out of jail. I want a yes or no out of you from which way you think, what's more effective, what I've been pushing out, which is. We're all protecting them and considering it'll have the right messaging and it protects that dollar amount. Versus the tool you just described, what do you want, because you need to give me an either or in this situation, so I understand what you think is most effective as the leader who's got the most volatile.
Knowing that the money would be available to me either way, I would say performance-based retention incentive program.
Which is what we should do anyway as part of what we're doing with people, because that's a merit-based
You've
promotion.
worked here, you know, greater than your year's introductory period. You have received the meets expectations performance review. You are currently not on any disciplinary, probationary, remedial
Yeah,
type
correct.
issues with the town, therefore you are eligible for this retention award.
But the counter to that, or the alternate to that, not so much a counter, is. You've been doing all this, we're doing performance reviews because it's our obligation to do that as good leaders, and we should always do that. And you're getting this bump in compensation, which is a pretty much more closer standard to what you would expect in government. And we just have to budget for that stuff.
I'm gonna go back and forth again, you know, I can live with either way, provided that we defend our position properly.
So. The great thing about this dialogue, and I just this with you, is you're pissing me off because you won't give me the answer. So with that being said, I'm teasing you, because, and I can appreciate, you don't have to land in either one, you don't need to. Where does that, you remain the strongest advocate for as is. Given everything that's thrown out there, do you think we should leave it as is, Jen?
I just said in my last comment that as long as we communicate and we keep levels current and we articulate it, that I think we can make this shift in 26.
Then I think we should do it because I think it's safer for our people and I think it's appropriate. That's my pitch. I am not falling on any sword.
Which do you think we should do?
This is where we'll wrestle and you really guy that's got either a club or a firearm and I'll come out the lesser of that battle. I say. We take those numbers, you can even plus them up a little bit and roll that into, we are going to put this into your compensation. So it's easier for us to provide to you. It's easier for it to be part of an increase because there's a COLA likely tied to it. We're also gonna continue to do performance reviews and increase money compensation based on performance. And we're gonna do that this coming year because it allows us to protect that against.
And it's harder to take away from you.
That's right. To me, that's where I'm coming, because I'm trying to move that out because I don't want flack from people who don't know what they're talking
A
about.
wage reduction is a lot less, discretionary than, a performance program.
But the great thing about a performance program is you can throw a lot of things into a performance program that give you a lot of versatility as a leader, including how this plays out. But it removes this thing that sounds like, and has been termed bonus.
You're putting it into just another category.
That's right, that's all you're
I
doing.
think, and I don't
What
know, even the
The
COLA,
practice, in part, what I'm hearing.
So I'm pushing for that because I think it's better for our people. But if you guys tell me it's not, I'm gonna back you because you're my leaders.
What Mike, remember I said that if it were a true performance bonus, then I think it's defensible. What Mike turned it into is sort of a performance bonus. In other words, it was a binary trigger. You have to hit certain criteria in order to be eligible for it. But if we do something like that, it really should only go to a certain percentage of the people, as opposed to everybody, because I'm pretty sure this bonus goes to almost everybody every year. And if you do that, I mean, I could support performance bonus, but only if there were a significant number of people that weren't getting it every year. We have some formality around that. And I think the only way to do that is if we have a compensation committee or the budget committee get deep into the detail for all the reasons I said before.
But I would argue that what I'm proposing removes the risk of an adverse reaction from what Mike has said he's seen happen, which is. You're not giving me what I want, I'll tell you what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna take a stapler or whatever, something. I'm gonna be late, I'm gonna do whatever I'm gonna do. I think, but I'm just trying, I think makes it easier to defend, and I'm all about that because I'm sensitive to what the public will say. About how we spend money, and there's nothing wrong with them doing that. Anyway. This is a lot of dialogue, and I know,
Yeah.
as usual, you get me onto one thing.
well, no, I mean, I think it's good to have this conversation.
It is.
That's what this meeting's
it's a
for.
part of. I mean, we need a compensation strategy, maybe we need a compensation committee to develop and advocate that strategy, and that's definitely a part of it, and I guess I was about to say we should move on, but I'll add what occurred to me to add, which is that,
Sorry.
I don't think the COLA is necessarily as relevant to this conversation about what's gonna happen with the bonus going forward. It's more the opportunity for providing merit increases. Because that is,
That's a tool.
That's a bigger.
It's a much better tool, merit
Like about
increases.
this for COLA and the opportunity to provide merit increases where they're warranted annually, we can never guarantee that. And that's, the latter has definitely not been the standard practice.
But I think it's a better standard practice.
And that is why there are bonuses.
Right, but I think but I think what you just talked about is a better standard practice for any workforce.
Yeah.
And I think on the heels of this, I think it's a positive. I think we can leverage what we've done so far by incorporating this there and making a better process, both for the town, the taxpayers' dollar and our employees. I don't wanna keep looking at Molly because she keeps nodding and agreeing with me, I think, and so I, like, that's good. Because I feel like you're picking up what I'm laying down, but I think you guys are too. Why don't you guys chew on it then, and maybe
Yeah.
come back,
That's what I was gonna say, why don't we move on and decide this next
because
meeting?
we definitely need to take a break before 4 o'clock. I don't feel like I'm lost.
Yeah, I was,
Lose my
so
mind by
yeah,
6:30.
so it's 3:15 and I think we need to certainly wrap this up by 3:30 at the absolute latest, and we have a few more slides to go through.
Fire it up.
Capital projects, so, what to talk about here, obviously, for the capital projects fund budget for next year. We've got $113,000 in total expenses, we do have like a facility planning phase 2 line item in there right now. What we're talking about doing is potentially some as-built survey work, geotechnical analysis on the sites that we own. Perhaps massing renderings. These are the things that John Byrne asked us to incorporate or recommended we incorporate in order to make sound decisions about what to build where. Avalanche, I've also got an avalanche study line item in there. I don't know if it makes sense to do avalanche studies at this point or when we get into building, but my sense is that it would be a valuable tool to prioritize sites to make a determination as to which site to do a new building on. Tom Moore Historic Structure, the Tom Moore Toilet stabilization project, that's been a stable, it's a toilet, man, you know,
This was talking about this every year.
I know,
Last
I know,
slide.
I know, and the architecture and facilities plan are to provide us an historic structures report on that, on the building, which will provide some recommendations on future use for stabilization projects. And they didn't do it before it snowed, so now it's covered in snow and they haven't done it, so we don't have a number for that yet, but I hope to get one before we need to wrap up the budget. I'd really like to, yeah, we don't need to talk about that anymore, that's one of the things on the security camera project up in March's office, security camera. Not gonna get done this year, we've got some problems with the vendor, I think we talked about that a little bit. But that we've not, anyway, so that's for next year. Finally, kind of the elephant in the capital projects room is this notion of acquiring a facility specifically related to snows. We've not discussed that in detail in a public meeting, but that may or may not, if it comes to pass, affect. We don't know which fiscal year that would affect. But whichever fiscal year it affects, obviously will have a huge impact on the fund balance and our opportunity to fund other major projects in the short term and the need to raise funds to do major projects in the long term. The water fund, you know, we're gonna talk about this more in the council meeting. That cost went way up. I have some ideas as to why. Or the budget amount we're gonna talk about in 45 minutes includes like a $400,000 expense on that project this fiscal year. And then we assume we'll propose spending the remaining up to $505,000 in next fiscal year. And there's a lot more to say about the mechanics of that. There's a lot of nuance. There are some
From a
choices.
cash standpoint, do you really think we're gonna spend $400,000 between now and June 30 on the water?
Potentially.
Money out the door, cash out the door,
Well,
or contract time?
accrual based accounting, yes.
Yeah.
We've got to order the materials. We have to have the materials.
The money might come out in July or August,
Yeah.
but for that portion of the
That's what I
project.
thought. All right.
Yeah.
But from an accrual based budget, we need to do it that way. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, we don't have another major capital project in the queue on the water system for next year. So we'll be focused on the water line. I mean, I think we just want to let the dust settle on that. Before we dig into future projects. And we also don't have a complete draft recommended master plan from the engineers. I'm really looking forward to that. There's some really good dialogue about that in the last couple of weeks, and like I said, I'm looking forward to that. So yes, there is a tentative water rate increase in the low double digits in the water fund budget that Jen has worked out. We
Super
discussed-
preliminary, and I think it amounts to like for residential visitor $17 or something. So that's kind of what we're talking about for that, but those are very preliminary numbers. So, but I figured you'd be curious about that bottom line, I guess.
You know, John suggested a 10% increase in water rates for 10 years.
There it is.
That's, yeah, that's a factor of more than 2.5 billion, that's.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
The problem, here's the problem. Is we're small scale
Mhm.
and we hadn't been accruing for the replacement and some of the other projects, you know, because we didn't have long-term financial planning stuff. So. So I don't know, I don't think you can get it out of the water, I think you're gonna have to do. Either a 20-year loan or something like that out of the general fund in order to facilitate that. Or maybe we can get some grants, there are some grants, I think, that we might be able to get. But, and I hate to raise this, but I think we should just out of prudence sake, is we exited some of the fire stuff, you know, under Harris's leadership. Maybe we should be looking to Snowbird or something like that to combine our water stuff, maybe we can get scale that way and get lower rates, I don't know. But
Yeah,
you know, our rates are. There's two issues here, one is 11% per year, people are gonna puke on it, the other one is if you start looking at our rates versus Snowbird's rates. You sort of go, and their explanations apply, but if we don't actually look at, well, maybe we shouldn't be doing it. It's just, I think, harder to determine.
Are you, I'm not familiar with number of rates, are they higher?
Highly subsidized by the state area.
Yep.
Actually,
how is that really? What does it mean for it to be subsidized?
where's the need?
Well, they absorb a lot,
They,
give them a bunch of money, or do they just pay a lot of water?
there's the way their structure works and how much they pay into.
But it's not like Snowbird makes a $5 million contribution to service area number 3 every year, they.
Or the
they have
residents
own
who are in
contract
that.
rate.
Should find, I need to talk with Amber again, but
I mean, it may just be a matter of scale, right?
it's not,
Well. Agree with that, you can get that,
yes,
You get it.
I've spoken with her and
so.
so I would frame it as. Snowbird is heavily subsidizing the rates of the residential customers.
Because they just absorb it.
I mean, I think it's a fair topic to discuss,
Yeah.
Craig, I mean, we've got. I mean, to provide a system, an adequate system technically, we've got we've got money to spend, we've got. Let's say. $2.5 to $5 million just for the system to perform the way it's supposed to. And that's not even taking into account replacing 50-year-old PVC pipes.
Yeah, I know.
And that, I mean, the amount of pipe that we've got buried in state roadways and the cost to dig into and rebuild those roadways is really high. So I shudder to think, honestly, but like, I do think it's an alternative that you should consider.
One of the things that I was gonna point out about the water fund, if we got into like the specifics of the budget, was that, on the capital project side of things, when we initially set out on the meter upgrade project, it was a 3-year project, we're in year 3. We're not gonna finish this year, we're gonna finish all of what I call the easy upgrades. We should be able to get to all the commercial units and everybody by the end of this year, but where we have to like hire plumbers and have like, where it gets really complicated, those remaining units, which is, you know, hiring a plumber's gonna add to the expense, we're gonna need another year to work through that. So I'm gonna propose some rolling over of, not a total increase to the cost, but just moving some money forward in FY 26. So just a heads up on that.
You're
Then-
getting, the project stuff you're doing and the multi-year planning is getting much better, I mean, I'm very happy with some of those we've made progress.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing, the housing stuff, should make progress.
But you know, we haven't been doing this for very long and that's, you know, a lot of the issues I'm raising are either process issues or how do we adjust to actually some long-term planning and how do we deal with it?
And then I just have not gotten to focusing on the sewer, it's too much, so, I brought it up.
Well,
We've covered a lot of ground today.
Yeah.
Pretty effectively.
Yeah, and we don't have any projects in the pipeline. I mean, we need a more mature scope concept from the master plan. And we just need to let the dust settle on this water line project that we're.
Is it dust that has to settle or is it just the water?
I think in this climate, it's often dust. Yeah. Especially during projects.
So maybe I can just highlight kind of like to-do items that came out of this meeting, for everybody and chime in when I'm done if I forgot something, but I'm gonna come back with some better TRT numbers projections for next year. We're gonna think more about, you're gonna come with your standard deviation and a goal for
Yeah,
the number
talk about how
for the
much money
general
we should pull
fund.
out of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're gonna specifically call out the fifth officer, in future stuff. Do we want to go to the council and ask to update the budget committee charter to give authority to this group to consider compensation? That's a question mark.
As opposed to having one more committee that.
Yeah, I think I would go either or.
Or,
Yeah, I mean,
when does
I
when
think
does that
if
go
we're
to
gonna
the
have a
council?
conversation, if we're gonna have a committee setting, I would rather have fewer committees than more.
I agree, 100%.
Cause
Um,
I was gonna not volunteer myself to be on that committee. As
I don't think there's necessarily, I mean, I think that there is work to do right now. To have a more coherent compensation strategy for the council to consider and maybe adopt. I've always wanted that or wanted that for the last 2 years. And then beyond that,
Yeah,
it
it
might
might
be
dissolve.
reviews like the outcome of our wage study updates and revenue projections. And I mean, I remember. We basically are doing it, right? We're basically doing that work already. So why don't we just make that clear with the council?
Okay. And then I think we should work through some communications and the concept of removing the GL code 111, for bonuses and try to figure out how to communicate that and how to roll that into.
Yeah, except for I consider actually titling that how to roll that into something that's standardized and still benefits.
Performance.
Yeah, and
And
still benefits
the
the,
merit,
yeah, right, and benefits the employee.
and going in that direction.
Yeah. Great.
Anything else?
Yeah, I got like 4 other items.
I know you do.
But I'll just quickly.
Let's be realistic on what I can do.
To be discussed next time, just so they
Okay.
get on the agenda. I think we need to move to monthly budgeting. And that allows us to be a lot more precise. And I think that's gonna be important as we do both tax increases and frankly, as I'm afraid the big rise in income, it may be stepping out.
Okay.
Because monthly budgeting is a lot of work, I would then recommend that we only submit the financials once a quarter. And why? Because of timing mismatches that you have to work out that are a heck of a lot easier to formalize if you just do it once a quarter. But I think that's an important maturation.
So what are they considering if they adopt a Q1 budget, or if they see Q1 financials in October?
I think I would lag them by a month. We ought to be able to do that. You know, not at the end of, not on September 30th, but by October 30th.
So they see Q1 financials in November,
Correct.
and if they're not getting monthly financials and we're doing monthly budgeting, what information are they taking into that decision about what the monthly budget is?
Well, the reason to do it is because all this is to move to variance budgeting. So instead of giving them 23 pages of all the line items, all you're doing is you're showing where's the variance against our budget? And I would recommend that we then pre-schedule a public hearing every time so that we can do budget amendments every time. That allows us to not put so much padding in our budget. But allows us to be able to update it very frequently and very routinely.
By every time, you mean monthly or quarterly?
Quarter,
Okay.
quarter.
Craig, can we wrap this up in like 1 minute, just to give Brooke a little bit of time to transition? There was 2 things out of 4.
I think we hit the other 2 already, which were the drain, the, you know, what do we want in the reserve? And that's enough anyway.
Okay. Thanks, I just wanted to- Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Thank you, Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
Dan?
It's not even quorum, Dan.
No, you're.
Okay, motion passes, meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
That's very long.
Aye.